All right, welcome to the channel. We are not in the garage, still part of Game Garage, but feels like negative 30 something. And I'm Minnesotan, and I do have a heater in the garage, but I'm not crazy. So for today, we're going to be doing it right here in the office. So we're going to be going over the old BetterBot project files, getting caught up to what's new. There are for some of the factions, pretty small changes. For other ones, large changes. So if you're like me and you've been using files that have been becoming increasingly outdated, this should be your one-stop shop for the Clockwork Conspiracy, Dummy Duchy, the Cogwheel Cult, and Rivetfolk. Spoiler alert, Rivetfolk has the most changes, but hopefully it's all for the better. Things may change again when they become Clockwork official. If and when they do, that will be a different video. But for right now, get caught up with what's new on the BetterBot project page, both on the boards and in the cards. So let's get to it. Okay, so first up, Contraption Conspiracy. There's actually no changes since the ones that I put on here. So obviously the name changed. They are now nimble again. Plot thickens is now more than their level, their difficulty level. It is not equal to or greater than. And then also there is no more exposure. So when it says for raid, when removed, blah, 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 in parentheses, exposure doesn't trigger this, which is from the human board. That doesn't need to be there because there is no more exposure. So the one thing that is definitely a change, all of the different plot token interaction cards for the different factions are gone, and there are just these two cards, which I have printed out in this enormous format again. So whether you're playing with a human or robot Corvid, you're going to be playing with these rules because, if you have a robot playing, whether you have a robot Corvid or human Corvid, in addition to that robot, you use these rules. And so it essentially means they get an attack of opportunity on a bomb before it goes off. If they can carve through all the soldiers or all the warriors to get to the bomb won't go off. Snare will not stop them from moving into or targeting spaces, but if they try to leave a path or put something into a place of the snare, it does stop that thing from happening, but then the snare is gone, because there's, rather than program in like a long series of if-thans so they can adequately respond, they just made it so it just kind of like resets the it just sends it back, and then you don't have to worry about it anymore. Okay, Cogwheel Cult. Obviously a big change here. The name, so it is no longer Logical Lizards, but Cogwheel, to give it more of that kind of old-timey feel. None of the berries change, however. So they've had a pretty major change in Birdsong. They no longer reveal, craft, and then perform conspiracies. You will, for Outcast, the most common suits in Lost Souls becomes the Order. In case of a tie, the birds become the Order. So that's a kind of cool thing, because Lost Souls is going to mean a lot more. So let's just take a quick look over at Lost Souls real quick. And the old ones, all the cards would go there just like a normal lizard cult, but it just kind of takes an extra second to remind you to shuffle. If there are multiple cards, like if a whole eerie decree gets discarded, you're going to shuffle those before putting them down on here, so you don't have just like a big stack of each suit together. So Birdsong is very different. For Daylight, the rituals themselves don't actually change. You're still revealing the top level cards from the Souls pile. It just clarifies in the order in which they were revealed, perform the rituals below for each. So pretty minor wording change on that one. For Evening, there's going to be a slight change. For score, discard, return are all going to be the same. But then instead of the fourth one where you place the order card on top of the Lost Souls. You're going to reveal the top card of the deck and craft it for +1 if it shows an available item, and then add it to Lost Souls. So crafting is at the end of the day. The way they craft now is further different from the other factions because they no longer reveal and craft right away, nor at the end do they need to take time to do anything with that order card because they don't have an order card. They are just creating their order out of the most populous suit in the Lost Souls. So the difficulty levels and the co-op mode have not changed. So the conspiracy track still works the same. Still going to move left to right for every acolyte in the box. However, there is an added clarification that if an action can't be taken, then you do not remove the acolytes. So you're still only, if you had 5 warriors in there, 5 acolytes in there, you'd still only do 5 things. But if, say, that third thing wouldn't happen, that third warrior doesn't, or acolyte doesn't get removed, it just stays there for the next time. And then finally, conspiracies. There is actually kind of an interesting change. They now will target the player first, and then the clearing that makes the most sense for that player. So that's kind of a major change of how ties are typically broken. And it's kind of cool. Alright, so the Dummy Duchy. The name, same. Hate surprises, poor manual dexterity is still the same. Price of failure has become cost of errors. The rule is still the same, but the name is different. And I think, if I'm just guessing, this is because it is slightly different than the human version, Price of Failure. And I think they kind of want to differentiate themselves whenever they can, if the rule is not exactly the same. And also, I think Cost of Errors kind of just references the fact that they are this, robot faction that's kind of riddled with errors. So Birdsong is the exact same as it was before. Okay, the change in daylight, I'm hypersensitive to this because I learned and taught this wrong, is still, you definitely want to read through it a couple of times. It winds up being the same unless I am mistaken. It's just that the Citadel is more prominently featured in the wording because the Citadel is the one they want to be placing because that's going to get them more guys. So instead of the Citadel being the otherwise rule, in this case it's place a Citadel if they do not outnumber markets, otherwise place a market. So it gets at the same thing, it just makes it more verbally clear that Citadels are the priority as opposed to the other time. The actual Citadels, like the buildings, same layout as before. Difficulty and co-op are still the exact same. Okay, so on the Minister track, there's a couple of changes, and I guess I didn't mention before the reason Cost of Errors, they might have wanted to make that distinct is because it's not the same rule clearly as unswaying your ministers. So, Cost of Errors instead of Price of Failure. So from top to bottom, the first one that's different is Marshal. So you're still going to move half of your warriors, rounded up from the clearing, to a clearing with the most of your warriors. But instead of it just saying a clearing not ruled by you and then just being priority as a tiebreaker, it is a clearing that you do not rule is the tiebreaker. So you could go to one that you actually do in fact rule. And then if there are multiples, it is by lowest priority, which makes sense because Dummy Duchy is not a faction that is clamoring for high priority in my mind. They're kind of the sneaky faction, or sneakier, so that makes sense. The only other one that's different is Brigadier, and this is a good change, or rather, I'm reading this as a good clarification, that the dig action still has the same rules. You need those 4 warriors in your burrow in order for it to happen. There was, I know, some confusion about that between myself and some other folks, and this makes it pretty clear, because if you cannot dig, you gain a victory point. So there's still something that happens, even if you can't get the full effect of, doing the dig. Okay, Rivetfolk. This is kind of a huge change. In general, they are not nearly as interested in this whole investment thing. They are going to trend more towards the ball of death strategy rather than, dividends and all that sort of stuff. Name is the same, all the berries are the same. The birdsong has some interesting changes. You no longer have that just like natural discard, like kind of cycling through the market. You are just stocking it. You're going to go until you have 5 cards. So that's so far kind of the same, but in a different way. And the order card later on in the 3rd step, it clarifies that it becomes your the rightmost card in the market. I'm not sure why they separated that, but is what it is. Craft. This is a different thing. So before, you could only craft your order card, so your rightmost card, if there's an available item on it. But now it says craft the first card added that shows an available item for a victory point, and then discard it. So there's assuming some cards are getting purchased, there's a better than average chance there's going to be something that's going to be crafted, and then they will do that, and then that gets cycled out. So there is still some volatility in the marketplace. It's just trending towards like a nerf to crafting for other factions, because they are going to, they have a wider range, they're a larger reticle to target craftable cards. Okay, so moving on to Daylight. Oh, and there is no more protectionism, because the investment track is gone. If you notice, the little track right above the little guy in the raft, no longer there. So in Daylight, also kind of a pretty big change. You are still placing a trade post and ordered clearing without one. There is now more of a clarity on clearing ties, as opposed to just priority clearing with pieces of the player with the most warriors in payments. So you're trying to, their Clockwork brain is targeting the people who are their most common purchasers. But then you also put level warriors, so 0, 1, or 2 for beginner, expert, master, level warriors into the same clearing, which obviously did not happen before, so that's pretty neat. Recruit works the same as it did before, and then protectionism takes place, so it's no longer part of Birdsong. If payment's empty, score level victory points and repeat the recruit action. So it protectionism exists, is in a different spot, but the way it works is totally different. Again, there's no investment track for them to go up. It just translates into victory points and then recruit again. So, if you're not buying stuff, they are going to be responding by amassing warriors on the map, and then they will battle in all ordered clearings if you have no warriors in your supply. So there's just a higher chance of that happening, because there's a good chance that they can go by and almost never battle with their old method. So the fact that they're looping on recruiting will help them out, get them into battle a little bit more often. Moving on to evening, racketeering is still there. Scoring is there, but it is slightly different. So it is only scoring points for your Rivetfolk and each warrior of the other player with the most warriors in your payment. And then all those scored warriors go back to their players. The others remain. So before, it was a point for all warriors from all players, and then equal to your investment track, and then they all went back. So it's a little bit different, more targeted at just that one player, which I think makes it a little bit more interesting because it's not just a constant influx outburst, like taking in, sending out warriors. It's more, I guess, could give the effect of like a human Riverfolk player choosing whose warriors they're going to pay for things with, as opposed to just saying like, I'm going to spend them all and they're all going back all the time. And then the discard, you're just going to discard the leftmost card in the market, as opposed to before where you discard if you crafted it. So a little less overhead, which is always nice. Okay, so for services, everything is the same except it no longer says that bots can buy any number of services. Everything is still limited, or everything is limited now by one service plus one per clearing with a trade post and any of their pieces. So that's a change for sure. And then this one does have a change to difficulty level. It is now to 0, 1, 2 as opposed to 1, 2, 3. Co-op mode is still the same. Let's see. For the Rivetfolk, the only one that changes, Greedy, Garrison, and Ferocious all stay the same. Involved is different. So before, it talks about if they don't buy your mercenary service on their turn, your warriors belong to all other players for rule and battle purposes, as if the player's opponents bought the mercenary service. Now, it changes it a little bit. If a human player did not buy your mercenary service on their turn, your warriors belong to all of their blah, 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 blah. Same thing as the card so far. Vagabond can buy mercenaries to avoid this, but does not gain the benefit of the service. So, it changes it to just be human, which I kind of assumed it to be, I believe. Because, this wouldn't... Again, a big part of how to program these Clockworks or better bots is kind of assuming that they don't have the flexibility to respond to things that aren't in their programming. So this involved being something that they are the Rivetfolk are using, they would have no idea how to respond to that. So this removes them from getting penalized. It's just humans who are going to get this penalty, but it also gives a nice attaboy to the Vagabond, which would be a huge pain. I know the Vagabond is a lot of people's kind of like punching bag for just like unfair OP or whatever it may be, but this would kind of be, if this was in play and the Vagabond just couldn't buy it because they can't, that would be a huge downside to it, because it would just be totally unfair. So this is nice. It allows them to get past the big downside without having like the crazy change, which would be to them actually being able to buy those mercenaries. I take back what I just said. So on the actual setup card, it does give the rule that bots can buy as many things as they can buy. They are not limited. So that is a superseding rule. I guess they didn't need to clog up the actual Rivetfolk board with that distinction between player and robot, because they did it over here on the setup card. They still do limit their purchasing from the Rivetfolk if the Rivetfolk are in the lead or ahead of them on the victory point track. So that's still in there. That's something that wasn't there and then was. Okay, so then the other part of the card is whether or not you want to... This would be the base purchasing that all the other bots would follow. So it gives you these rules that if you go for... You don't want to have to, go through different order of operations for the factions. You can just use this one generic rule set for all of them, where it talks about how they would only buy hand cards if they tried to craft and they couldn't. No one will buy riverboats generally if you use the basic ones. And then the rules for using mercenaries when they would choose to make that purchase. It also clarifies the Vagabot, which uses the same purchasing power or process as a human Vagabond, which is exhausting items, and then using the Rivetfolk warriors. And it clarifies a couple of things, even in the generic rules, that Automated Alliance will use Riverfolk warriors for purchasing as opposed to their own, because as a human player you need to weigh the costs and benefits to that against the drawback of losing a huge portion of your force potentially. Robots don't know how to do that, so it's just going to take that self-destructive tendency out of their hand. And then Cogwheel Cult will never buy bird cards. Just a clarification there. I'm not going to go through them individually, but there are new trading rules that they will all follow. Which again, if you want to have them all work, uniquely for the different factions, you can use this. This is referred to as the advanced setup. If you don't, you can just use the basic one, and that works just fine too. There is also included in the file now a Underground Duchy or Dummy Duchy rule set for purchasing, because the Rivetfolk preceded the Dummy Duchy, so they didn't have one before, but now they do. So those are the changes. Some pretty big ones with Rivetfolk, decently some interesting ones for Cogwheel Cult. Dummy Duchy and Corvid Conspiracy are pretty, or the Contraption Conspiracy are pretty minor. I guess actually no, a large change for Conspiracy is the plot tokens and how those are dealt with now. So I'm excited to get these to the table and see what they feel like now, and hopefully be doing that soon.